Summer is winding down, which means school is starting back up again. But for some of you, that also means your hard-working summer jobs are coming to a close, which can only mean one thing. It's time to start looking for computer parts to build your long-awaited gaming PC. However, since minimum wage jobs in most states don't pay shit, I did the research, and today I'm going to tell you guys about the best graphics cards you can get for your gaming computer that are under $250. Now, this video is going to be split up into 3 different parts. I'm going to be looking at the top budget choice from both AMD and Nvidia, then I'm going to put the 2 cards head to head using online benchmarks and a $1 per FPS chart I found, courtesy of techspot.com. I'm also going to be introducing a really powerful used graphics card that you can get on eBay right now for about $250. To be completely fair to my viewers, please note that I don't actually possess any of the cards that I'm talking about in today's video. I'm not that rich! Nor are any of these benchmarks from my personal computer. I'm rather putting together the benchmarks and charts that I found to make a simple and easy buying guide for you guys so that you don't have to go through the same research process that I did. Got it? Great. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. So, starting with the Nvidia side of things, my recommended budget graphics card is the GeForce GTX 1660 graphics card that starts at around $220, which is near the higher end of our $250 price limit, but still, for $220, this card puts out really good performance. And we have the gaming benchmarks to prove it. Looking at gaming benchmarks, this card holds up. In the Division 2, the GTX 1660 manages an average of 68 frames per second at ultra settings 1080p. In Star Wars Battlefront 2, the GTX 1660 manages an average of 85 frames per second at ultra settings 1080p. And in The Witcher 3, the GTX 1660 just barely misses the 60 FPS mark, managing an average of 57 frames per second at ultra settings 1080p. So, it appears that, in most case scenarios, the GTX 1660 should be able to achieve around 60 frames per second in-game at ultra settings 1080p. However, something to note is that this benchmark I was looking at was testing this card with an i9 9900K processor and 32 gigs of DDR4 RAM. Which is just... what? For most of you guys, those specs are just completely unrealistic. So please just know that when you look at the GTX 1660, you're probably going to need to turn most of those settings down to achieve these same frame rates. Which honestly isn't that big of a deal. If you want to, you can go watch my video on high versus ultra settings and why there isn't much of a difference between the two. But all in all, for $220 on the Nvidia side, if you want to get a GTX 1660, you really can't go wrong with it. So moving over to the AMD side of things, the card that I'm going to be looking at today is the Radeon RX 580 for around $180. So compared to the GTX 1660, this card is much cheaper. But the question is, does it perform better? And the answer? It depends. Looking at benchmarks for those 3 same games, running those games at 1080p ultra settings once again, the benchmark I looked at found that the RX 580 actually got the same frame rate in the Division 2, running at a smooth 68 frames per second. In Star Wars Battlefront 2, however, the RX 580 saw a dip in performance in comparison to the GTX 1660, running at 67 frames per second compared to an 85. And finally, looking at The Witcher 3, the RX 580 once again delivers quite similar performance to the GTX 1660, averaging 54 frames per second compared to the 1660's 57. So, looking at these cards, for $40 less, the RX 580 puts out pretty similar performance to the GTX 1660. And looking at the frames per dollar chart I found at TechSpot, it becomes clear that the RX 580 is giving you a lot more bang for your buck compared to the GTX 1660. However, it is worth noting that since the RX 580 is a little older than the GTX 1660, it does consume a lot more power. So, if that matters to you, maybe the GTX 1660 is worth that extra $40. Okay, so now that we've compared these 2 cards, I'm going to be introducing a third option to the table. Remember the GTX 1070, that 3-year-old card that was introduced in 2016 at a starting price of $400? Well, if you look for this card on Amazon now, the lowest price you'll be able to find is around $370, which doesn't exactly fit into the budget category. However, If you look for it on eBay, you're going to be able to find this card for as low as $200. And considering the performance it gives you in games, that price is insane. I mean, we are talking unmatched performance from the RX 580 or even the GTX 1060. Seriously, when comparing these three cards, the GTX 1070 blows these other two out of the water every time. However, once again, compared to these two cards, it consumes power like a beast. And if you want to get a lower price for this card, it will have to be used. So, if either of those things matter to you, maybe go with one of the other options I stated previously. At the end of the day, all three of these cards are really good options for the performance they're going to give you. If you don't mind going the used route, then I'd personally recommend the GTX 1070, because the performance it gives you for the used price is seriously unmatched. However, if you want a new card or power consumption is important to you, I'd honestly recommend the Radeon RX 580, since that card gives you really solid frame rates at ultra settings for under $200. I'm not saying that 1660 is bad, but I am saying that in terms of price to performance, it really can't match the RX 580. However, if you were looking at that card and want something that will give you a little more performance, then go ahead and go for it. It is by no means a bad card. Anyways, that's really all I have for this video. Please let me know what you thought. Feedback and constructive criticism would both be very appreciated. Go ahead and leave a like if you found this video helpful, and subscribe for future post notifications. I'll hopefully have a new video out for you guys soon, and I'm so sorry that I've been so inactive recently, but for now, thank you guys all so much for watching. It really means a lot to me, and like I said, I will catch you all in the next one. Bye guys.